Everyone. My name is Andrea Gillespie, your host for the Housing for All weekly webinar series produced by Dallas Housing Coalition. I also serve as Senior Manager of Community Development at Charles Schwab Bank and as a board member of the Dallas Housing Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us this morning after a week hiatus. On each episode of the Housing for All webinar series, we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. By having impactful conversations with members of the Dallas Housing Coalition and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping the city affordable. Joining us this morning are two formidable guests from the Jubilee Park and Community Center nonprofit organization. And they are Marissa Castro Mikoy and Julia Alessandra. Marissa is the president and CEO of Jubilee Park and has been so since July of 2020. And in that role, she is bringing extensive experience in organizational leadership, fundraising, organizational promotion, and programming. She previously served as the executive director of After School All Stars. Julia is a housing and workforce manager of the organization. In her role, she designs and implements housing and workforce-related programming, which has included home repair, job training, and case management programs, through which local residents are connected to needed services and opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us, Marissa and Julia.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Well, we can just go ahead and dive right into the conversation. And Marissa, I'd love to start with you. We probably have many viewers who are with us right now who may not know as much about Jubilee Park and Community Center as they wish they could. And I'm wondering if you could just share with us a little bit about the organization and the neighborhood that it serves.
Sure, I'd love to. So Jubilee Park and Community Center, we're a nonprofit that is located in Southeast Dallas, so south and east of I-30. And we are what is called a place-based initiative. So really what that means is that we're an organization that is laser focused on a discrete neighborhood. So that's Jubilee Park, and that is 62 blocks of the neighborhood that serves or that houses about 3,000 residents. So we have a community center that I'm sitting in now, and there are 6 other buildings on our campus that are here to serve the community. And everything that we do is tied to what we call our 5 pillars of impact. And what that is that's education, housing and workforce, opportunity, safety, and health. So those 5 pillars of impact are also aligned to the social determinants of health, which most of you probably know, but that is what the CDC has determined is what one needs to live a healthy life. And so it's not just your physical health, but it's your environment, it's your emotional health, your spiritual health, all of it. So that's what we do. And our mission is to be a catalyst for community revitalization for this specific neighborhood in Southeast Dallas.
That's great. Thank you so much for such a great overview. And I particularly love how you talked about the organization in terms of its pillars. And that kind of leads me into my next question for you, which is about housing. And housing was one of the pillars that you mentioned that the organization upholds and works through. And I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about how that pillar looks, in particular, how it's aligned with Jubilee's overall mission, and why it's so important to the residents of Jubilee Park.
Sure. And Andy, if it's okay, maybe I go back a little bit and kind of give some context to the neighborhood.
Yes, that would be great.
That's okay. But, you know, in the 1950s and 60s, this was a neighborhood that was a thriving Black neighborhood. It was a middle-class neighborhood. A lot of people were employed by the Ford plant that was here at the time. And then a couple things happened that really changed the face and the future of people that were living here. And that was, one, the Ford plant closed, so jobs went away. And then I-30 was built, which is cut off resources for the neighborhood. So it really cut off resources from North Dallas. So that's a lot of the disparity that you see from North and South happened because of the highway. And so a lot of these houses that are here, we've got people living here that have been here for generations, and the homes are anywhere from 70 to 100 years old. So when you think about, I mentioned the social determinants of health, housing is one of them, your environment and where you live. That is critical to one's well-being. So when you have, our neighbors, our average family of 4 are living off of $55,000 a year. The living wage that's just living wage, not thriving wage, but the living wage for a family of 4 is about $103,000. So you see there's such a gap. So and 96% of our neighbors are employed. They're just underemployed. So I just share that as a backdrop of, housing is really, really important because people have to live in a safe and habitable environment in order to be healthy. And so part of our work and what we're committed to doing is, one, making sure that people who live here can stay in their home and that they're safe. So, and Julia will talk a little bit more about our minor home repair program and programs that we partner with the city with the major home repair, which I believe is called the HIP program. But also looking at, families or residents that are elders or seniors who are living on a fixed income. So even less than $55,000, like a lot of them are living off of $15,000 to $20,000 a year. So there's not that disposable income to work on a foundation, or you have a storm like we just had earlier this week, and you've got roof damage. There's just not that income. So for us, guiding principle is we want people to be able to stay in their home, especially if they've lived in this home and they own the home, they've had it for generations. And 2, because of where we are in the city, we're so close to downtown. I mentioned the highway is right there. There's a lot of development happening in and around Fair Park. Gentrification is not a bad word. Displacement for us, that's the risk. And so for us, it's formulating a strategy of putting up additional affordable housing options for people to ensure that people can stay in the community where their family and their neighbors and their friends, their community lives, but also making sure that people are living in safe dwellings. So it's sort of 2-pronged, making sure that the homes that are existing are safe and they can live there, but also the future for us is really looking at additional, having a hand in putting up additional affordable housing options for the neighbors.
That's great. Thank you so much for not only going back towards the history of Jubilee Park, and I'm speaking for myself when I say this, but I think understanding the history of anything is so important to getting a handle on key conditions in the lay of the land. Because what you'll find is in many cases they're so inextricably connected.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing the history of Jubilee Park. I learned a lot that I did not even know about that area. And I loved how you really thread the needle between affordable housing and why it's so important, but also in the backdrop of economic revitalization, which sometimes, if not handled, I guess, in a thoughtful manner, can lead to displacement. So it's about, yes. From Jubilee Stamp Park, it sounds like it's about keeping people in their homes, but also keeping people in the neighborhood through affordable housing options overall.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. And Julia, I want to bring you into the conversation as well. And particularly in your role as housing and workforce manager, I'm wondering if you can share some of the strategies that Jubilee Park uses to understand the housing needs and preferences of the residents you serve, and what programs you've implemented in response to having a deeper understanding of your residents and their needs and preferences.
So we use a lot of different ways to kind of engage the community in program development. And the main one is, of course, like talking to folks who come through our programs and having that interaction. And then we've also done many surveys of the community over the course of our 27 years. We've done multiple housing assessments of the community to identify what they want. Kind of in response to that, in the 2010s, we partnered to build a senior housing complex called Gurley Place. And we also partnered to develop some single-family homes, affordable single-family homes in the neighborhood. We've also, as Marissa mentioned, developed a minor home repair program in response to a lot of the houses that have been in families for generations. And like Marissa said, like 60% of owner-occupied homes in the neighborhood are over 70 years old. So there's a lot of need there. In 2022, we repaired 12 homes in the first year of that program. In 2023, last year, we repaired 28 homes. And then in 2024, our goal is to repair 38 homes. So we're slowly ramping that up. We see a lot of need of that in the neighborhood. Another tool we use under our housing pillar is education. So we've seen a need for education around the homestead exemption in the neighborhood, and we've had resources come out and help people sign up for that, in addition to heirs property issues, because these houses have been in families for generations. So we implement that as well. We also have a rental assistance program to help people stay in their homes, and we also do mortgage assistance as well.
That's amazing, Julia. So it sounds like there's really just a whole continuum of housing programs from on one end, brick and mortar housing development, and on the other end, keeping people in their homes through your home repair program. That's great. You brought up a term that I want to come back to that I think is so important to an earlier point that Marissa made about gentrification and displacement, and that's heirs property. Can you talk about what that is and why that's so important to address through education of the homestead exemption, like what you mentioned, in the backdrop of like rapid economic development and sometimes gentrification?
Yeah, absolutely. So heirs property is basically where a house, someone may have died without a will, and there might be multiple heirs to the property, and it might have to go through probate, and like folks don't have legal resources to be able to navigate that. It's a very complicated process. So a house might fall into disrepair because no one is the specific owner of the house, or it can just cause a lot of issues in terms of maintaining generational wealth as well. But yeah, basically heirs property is where a house has some kind of inheritance difficulty happening.
So it stands to reason that if the primary owner dies and they've left their property to multiple owners, on one hand, that seems like a good thing, but on the other hand, that creates lots of issues just in terms of protecting the asset, paying the taxes, just when you have a lot of people that have to navigate through that instead of one owner that's responsible for like assuming the inheritance and then being responsible for everything themselves.
And I would just add, it is so confusing and so complicated. It is not an intuitive process. And I will just have to brag on Julia. I mean, Julia has taken people to court, accompanied them, helped them fill out papers, really help them understand the process. Sometimes in families, and this is across the board, maybe not everybody's on the same page. So having to navigate that side of it before you even go before and submit paperwork to put the property under one name or two names or whatever that might be. But it's difficult. It's really difficult to navigate. And when you've got, households who have a lot of challenges, this is one thing that it's just another roadblock, in terms of how do they make life livable and contribute to the well-being of their household if there's 8,000 other things that they've got to, they got to go and work 2 or 3 jobs and make sure that they're paying all the bills. And, so anyway, just to share the complexity of challenges that we're expecting, our neighbors to navigate.
And especially with older homes, a lot of them are in disrepair, and folks aren't eligible for any home repair programs if there's not clear ownership.
That's right.
Got it.
I'm also seeing that.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. Thank you for going a little deeper on the heirs issue, because I think it's an important issue that our viewers need to have on their radar, and understanding how it can affect affordability of housing just for the broader sector, or a swath of people. The next question is for the both of you, and it's about policy. And I'm just wondering, is policy part of your work overall? And if so, what policy changes do you think need to be made to support broader affordable housing initiatives like yours or other organizations?
So policy is definitely part of our work. Like, we want to keep track of what's happening, and we want to help our neighbors advocate for themselves. So we believe strong measures need to be taken to counteract displacement that is happening in the city, and increase the stock of affordable housing in Dallas. So we know we're seeing increasing housing costs with so many people on the edge of affordability. So partnering with the public sector to control housing cost burden for our neighbors. We have the 33,600 housing gap that we know is happening, and the threat of homelessness is facing a lot of families who are housing cost burdened. And we're also looking into ways to empower communities like ours to counteract the displacement that is happening.
And I would just add, I think on the policy question, there's so much work under this one pillar, housing, that we're focused on. So Julie is absolutely right. Like, we have got to keep our eye on what's happening in the community and in the public sector space at the city, state, and federal levels. But we really do depend on our partners like the Dallas Housing Coalition to help, one, keep us informed, two, listen to the calls to action, and how can we participate, and then collectively as organizations that are serving communities, what can we do together to be a powerful voice? So I would say, like, the value of having a Dallas Housing Coalition in our work and in our orbit is so important, because we just don't have the bandwidth, and I mean that, like, resources, like financially, to have somebody in-house do that, or the time in the day when we're working on all the other pieces are just around housing. I want to kind of give that kind of background. But the other thing I would say is, I think your question was like, what policy changes or things come up, and for me, I think about working with the city, and actually at the state level, on tax abatements or tax solutions for communities like Jubilee Park, where the threat of displacement is so high and time is of the essence. And so what can we do from a tax solution abatement perspective to help protect neighbors from being priced out of their homes because they won't be able to afford the property taxes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. I think first, thank you for highlighting the value of the Dallas Housing Coalition. I think that's important to put that out there. So I appreciate that. But thank you for just really talking about, in fact, with the living in really the backdrop or the reality of potential displacement, how important policy changes like tax solutions are to keeping people in affordable places, or creating options where they don't have to uproot themselves and figure something else out. So those are very good points that I'm glad you highlighted. And Marissa, just staying with you for a second, I'm wondering, and this goes back to the work of Jubilee Park, in community center. What metrics or success stories and maybe indicators do you use to know that you're making a difference and that your programs are working?
Yes. Well, one is, we have invested in having a staff position, a director of research, evaluation, and impact, who is looking at the efficacy across all of our pillars. So for us and for me as the leader, I want to make sure whatever effort and resources that we're putting out, it better be moving the needle. And if it's not, then what do we learn from that? And we can only do that if we have somebody who is designing an evaluation and impact plan to be able to look at the key metrics and how we're moving, making life, well-being better here at Jubilee Park, and bringing again, like, I don't know if I said this earlier, but headline is bringing equity to the neighborhood. Equity that was lost in the 50s and 60s when all of those things happened, and lots of other things happened as well. Those are just two that I highlighted. But so we have someone focused on that. And the way we gather information is, one, it's so important to be talking to our neighbors. So focus groups, surveys, making it easy for people to give us feedback, and then to follow up with, okay, let's take minor home repair. We built a ramp so that it was wheelchair accessible, or we widened a doorway. Something in that vein. We'll follow up like in 3 months and 6 months, and in some cases a year later, to say, are you still in your home? Are you able to utilize your bathroom now? Can you use your front? Can you get into your house on your in the front door now? But we're just following. I mean, that's just one example, but just depending on what it is, that the intervention or the repair that we're making, because we have to see that, like, our efforts are contributing to people being able to stay in their home and that they're safe. And the other thing that we do that I love is we do block walks once a month, and so we're going door to door and across the 62 blocks, and we're giving information of, here's what's happening at Jubilee, here are resources you can access. And we actually do that with our partners from Dallas Police Department. I didn't mention this, but we have a substation on our campus that is, we have 8 DPD officers that are assigned to Jubilee Park as their beat, and they are very much an extension of our staff. And so we do block walks once a month. Actually, we're going on one tomorrow with them, tomorrow morning. But we learn what's happening. I mean, that's where I'm standing on a front porch and I'm having conversations with homeowners and people that live there, and I hear all about their families, but also I'm like, oh, this porch is sideways, or there's real difficulty in opening and closing the door. So that level of knowing and understanding what's happening with our residents is so powerful, because then we bring that information back and we say, okay, what else do we need to be focused on? I mean, aside from the direct intervention with that one homeowner, but it's also like, this is what we're seeing across the board, maybe with our seniors. What can we push out, or what can we design that will help? If it's education, with developers knocking on doors, offering cash offers, that's something that we've learned. Mm-hmm. So education on that. So anyway, that's just a really powerful way of listening, hearing, and then responding to the needs of the community.
Thank you, Marissa. I have to say, I just love the intentionality of keeping the lines of communication open between the organization and the residents that it serves, through just some very real, concrete, understandable strategies like the block walking you mentioned, the surveys, the focus groups. I think that alone is a success story, I would say, is that being able to create a channel to getting very rich qualitative data. I can see that being extremely important to the work that you're doing. So yes, thank you for walking us through that. And Julia, just to switch gears and come back to you for a second, in your role as housing and workforce manager, I'm sure you are keeping tabs on the work being done to update the City of Dallas's comprehensive land use plan. It is complex.
It's complex too.
That is known as Forward Dallas. And I'm just wondering, based on what you know about Forward Dallas, if there are any specific outcomes that you're hoping to see in the final version of the plan, and if so, what those might be.
Yeah, so we're definitely kind of staying abreast of it, definitely with the help of the Dallas Housing Coalition as well. I think Forward Dallas, they've done a lot of community feedback. They've incorporated a lot of community feedback. They've done a lot of work in that regard while generating some controversy recently. I think that the spirit of the endeavor is really good. And I know James Armstrong recently wrote a piece in the Dallas Morning News about some ways that they might be able to bridge that gap. But it doesn't change zoning. It just changes the recommended use. So there's that. We plan to, Jubilee kind of plans to keep an eye on what they do with the neighborhood nodes, because we believe that we are a neighborhood node. And we want to kind of keep tabs on where that goes. We're also concerned with the conservation of existing housing stock, which is mentioned in the plan as evidenced by our home repair program. And we're also looking at the ideal outcomes of using surplus land for affordable housing and anti-displacement tools, which we really need. So we're really excited about those aspects of Forward Dallas.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then a final question before we, as I like to say, land the plane and bring this conversation to a conclusion. And this is really for both of you. And it's what I like to say, kind of a pie in the sky dreamer question, but dreams are important because they lead to hopefully better realities. And I'm wondering, what are your long-term goals as they relate to attainable housing for Jubilee Park and the work that the organization is doing in that respect?
So our vision long-term for Jubilee Park is to be a thriving mixed income community where the people who want to live in Jubilee Park are able to live in Jubilee Park and thrive. So that's like our long-term vision. And Marissa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it is the ultimate goal. And, we did a visioning exercise beginning of the year of, if you close your eyes, like, what do you think, as leadership and as our team, like, what do we want this neighborhood to look like? And it's one that is not dissimilar to many neighborhoods that are north of I-30, which is, habitable, safe homes, a place where kids can be together, families can be together and play together. And it's a place where there are jobs. And, we were talking like high school students can get a job at the CVS that's around the corner, but it's people of different incomes living next to each other. So it's that. And then, the thing that I would say is, the question I get is, well, why should people care? That don't live in the neighborhood. Why should people that live in North Dallas care? And what I go back to is, we are all part of one bigger community in Dallas. Like, we are made up of a bunch of different neighborhoods and a bunch of different communities that is the fabric of who we are. And as human beings, we want to be connected to one another. Belonging is a human need that we have to be connected to one another. And so why you should care is we're a part of a bigger community. And, I always say, like, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable. We should care because there's a lot of wrongs that happened in South Dallas and in our history. And I think it's important to make strides to bring access to resources and to really just bring equity to a huge part of our community of Dallas that deserves it. And we've got kids, thousands of kids that live in South Dallas that have such promise and potential, and they need the opportunity to be able to develop and grow and then give back and contribute to the greater Dallas community. So I kind of went into a little bit different, but that's the why people should care.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Marissa and Julia, for joining us this morning, and more importantly, sharing your unique perspectives on affordable housing, and really why we should care. So thank you. First off, have a wonderful weekend. And second off, much success in 2024. Before we sign off today, I just want to remind everyone joining us to follow Dallas Housing Coalition on all of its socials for updates on how you can get involved in the work of the coalition, and on future installments of our Housing for All webinar series. While you're at it, please go visit the Dallas Housing Coalition's website at dallashousingcoalition.com to learn more about our member organizations like Jubilee Park Community Center, and a host of others. And while you're there, if you're not already a member, it's very easy to do so at the website. Thank you again for tuning in to another installment of our Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Thanks again. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.